Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, GCP, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
Ryan,
and Peter.
Episode 212, recorded for May 17th, 2023. The Cloud Pod sings a duet about AI. Good evening, Matt, Ryan, and Jonathan.
Hey guys.
Yeah.
Hello.
How is it going this week in the cloud for you guys?
As long as we don't have to sing, I'm good.
I signed you up for the duet, so it was definitely you and Jonathan. I thought the harmonies of the Britishness would be amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have to make a Monty Python song about AI. That'd be hilarious.
That would be good.
ChatGPT can get to work.
Yeah. No, Bard would be more appropriate for this. Because a bard, Bard's a poet, so it'd be more appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I want a good song.
That's in the after show.
Yeah. You're making promises for that after show that aren't going to get fulfilled, so...
Yeah, and we can get Grimes voiced to sing it for us. Since apparently she said that anyone can use her likeness to generate AI music, which I thought was kind of interesting.
That's interesting. All right. Well, we do have many cloud stories this week. So first up, Terraform Cloud service is making several updates to their Terraform Cloud capability that provides access to premium features for up to 500 resources in the free tier, as well as new paid offerings for management capabilities, scaling concurrency, and enterprise support, as well as consistent billing metrics based on managed resources across tiers. New features include a premium security feature such as SSO and policy as code on all tiers included in the free, making it easy and frictionless for smaller teams and organizations to get started with their first use cases. And finally, updated paid tiers provide easy upgrade paths for organizations as their usage scales up and down to move between the tiers. So one of the things that I would point out in this is that they did change the pricing model to now include per resource charges, which may catch you by surprise if you have over 500 devices. You can stay on your legacy models, but of course the big carrot here is SSO and Sentinel OPA support. But do be aware what that trade-off is before you switch your license type and then suddenly start paying for your thousands and thousands of resources when you used to just pay for users, which apparently is a realization by HashiCorp that it's harder to delete your resources than lay off employees that you're paying for in Terraform Cloud.
Yeah, I mean, the licensing for Terraform products for cloud and both enterprise has always been rough, right? Like starting off per users, for cloud makes sense. And at some point for enterprise, they had switched to per project, not users, because they figured that out very quickly that what everyone did was just sort of link it together behind automation pane. So there's a single server that's running the Terraform apply, and then it's really cheap. But then per project it creates some really weird edge cases where people are putting too many workloads into a single project in order to reduce that number. And then, a lot of the advantage is managing the access to that project. And so now everyone has access to your project. It's really hard to write policies at that level. And so it just sort of defeats itself. So while it sounds terrible, I wonder what, like in practice, like I'm hoping that this is sort of a reasonable cost per resource.
I mean, it's definitely one of those things that you don't want to fight against the native cloud pricing model that you already sort of have. The resources are basically, I don't know, I can't do the translation to the proper level of decimal points here, but it's 3 zeros and a 14 per hour per resource. So, I mean, like you're talking about on a monthly basis. Let's see, let me do some quick real-time math. You're basically paying 10 cents a month per resource. So it's not like it's a crazy amount of money today in the standard tier. Now, in Plus and Enterprise, we get more features. Maybe it costs more, but that's the only thing they have on their public website right now.
Per hour. That bothers me slightly.
Yeah, store the state somewhere.
Yeah, they do, and that's fair enough. Yeah. I get that. So we just have to create our stuff and then orphan everything and just delete the workspace. We get the stuff deployed for free. And then just import it all back in again later.
Hey, I got a script that will dynamically create Terraform code based on deployed resources. So sure, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
I just hope it doesn't force people into weird patterns, or got some accountants saying, hey, you've got to cut down your resources, adopt these weird patterns of Terraform usage just to make it a little bit cheaper.
I mean, again, the devil's in the details of what they consider a resource, right? And is it every single thing? I mean, 10 cents per EC2 instance. Like, yeah, I get 10 cents worth of value out of Terraform, not having to manually do that stuff. So, like, but then like you get into like S3 buckets and like, I'm definitely not going to get 10 cents of value out of an S3 bucket every month. So,
well, even take EC2, like it's the volume that's a resource that it's attached to. The security group is a resource that it's attached to. There's the
rules for each rule for the security group is a resource.
Yeah. So it's hard to get a single instance under 5 resources, of many, many different things, like even Lambda. And when you start considering VPC attachments and versions and all of that, it balloons out real quickly. Yeah. So it's tricky.
The one thing I do like here is that they're getting rid of the SSO tax. They are giving you security at the base level. So while it does sound like it's going to be a little bit rough with the pricing, especially on exactly what they consider a resource, giving security at the free tier, I feel like is a very nice feature.
Yeah. Policy of code, especially like, one of the gigs I worked at, like that was the thing that made us purchase Enterprise, was that the ability to do that.
Well, and I think we talked about on the show before that, Sentinel is a really great capability, but it was locked behind a very expensive tier of licensing. So that's why everyone's kind of running towards OPA as an open source alternative to it. But now this kind of unlocks Sentinel as, I can use Sentinel again because now it's included in my license tier without additional cost. So that, it's not a terrible choice by them. It's just, again, how does it all work out in the end? And it would be nice if they would declare which are what they consider to be billable resources versus just supportive resources. I think that's probably the next evolution of maybe this. Because I do think there'd be some pushback on the pricing.
It's the only go forward model, though. Like, I mean, I don't think there's any other ideas, and other than being able to bill by resource and then define the types of resources that you care about that are included in state.
It's not bad. I mean, 10 cents for resource per month. It really isn't bad in the grand scheme of things. You're going to spend $2,000 on a server. What's 10 cents?
Well, I mean, but again, like as Ryan said, it's really 5 at a minimum. It's 5 things, and it's probably even more than that. So it's probably more like $4 to $5 a month per server when you factor in all the pieces.
If they're billing you for every single resource, right? Like that's the hope, is that they're calling it at some sort of sane level where it's like the EBS attachment that is attached to your EC2 instance if you're in Amazon. That's not a resource. It's an attachment, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it would be nice if they had in the Terraform pricing some details on that, because that is probably the big question here that I would have out of this is what's the resource considered and what does it look like?
I've asked this question of many a vendor in cloud realms because I think this is going to become more and more popular because it's really the only thing that makes sense. Everything else becomes too burdensome if it's doing % of spend or if it's by, I remember when it was per AWS account for a long time, like that was awful for when you started to enable, a larger organization. And so this is really the only go forward plan because it works for every layer, including, people outside of enterprise.
Yeah, they need to start to do like example pricings like the cloud vendors do. Like, hey, in this situation, this is what it would be. Here's your example. Here's your price, and kind of work it down that way. That needs to start to be things that more vendors include when they post these things.
The Terraform Cloud cost and usage report is going to be awful.
Maybe they'll use the standard format.
I hope so. God, I hope so.
It's going to be like Datadog. Like I had to figure out my Datadog pricing. It's like 75,000 dimensions of pricing complexity in Datadog.
I was asked recently, hey, if we move to Datadog, can you give me a rough budget line item? And I was like, no.
Yeah.
No, I can't. I don't even understand what all the items on the website are talking about, let alone figuring out without running it through. And then at the bottom of their documentation, it literally says, just go launch it in your environment for a few days to get pricing. And I'm like, that doesn't feel useful.
Yeah, that sounds like a way to spend a lot of money very quickly.
Yeah.
Probably less than 65 million, but, maybe not by much.
Not by much. That's why I went with New Relic, because honestly, I looked at the pricing comparison and I was like, this is a lot easier. Data and users, I can calculate those. I cannot calculate this Datadog mess.
Although it's funny is that, no matter what you choose, like now the next hurdle is evaluating that new relic and its integration points and the cost that can come of that, right? So you incorporate that cost, which you'll see on your cloud provider of pumping metrics into New Relic. And so I wonder why FinOps is becoming so popular. I don't understand.
Because it takes a PhD to understand finances at this point of these cloud resources.
Especially if you're in a multi-cloud environment, because there's no standard format for we know we talked about FinOps has released a standard format, but no one's adopted that yet. So right now you have, all the complexities, and like in Amazon, right? An AMI can include a Windows or SQL Server license, but in Google, they break it out on a separate line item. I don't know what they do in Azure because I don't look at Azure bills, but there's so much complexity.
Yeah. Well, in Azure, it's, the price of the resource, and then there's a separate line item for licensing.
Yeah, the same way as on Google then.
Yeah, makes sense.
I mean, Google had to copy it from somebody, so clearly it wasn't Amazon because we know they screwed that up.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's talk about Amazon, shall we? Amazon Aurora IO optimized cluster configurations with up to a 40% cost savings for IO intensive applications are now generally available to you. The new cluster configuration offers improved price performance and predictable pricing for customers with those IO intensive apps, such as e-commerce applications, payment processing systems, and pretty much anything that has SAP on it. You can now confidently predict costs for most IO intensive workloads with up to 40% cost savings when your IO exceeds 25% of your current Aurora spend. If using RIs for Aurora, you will see even more savings than the 40%. But that is your floor by moving to this instance type. So if you're spending more than 25% of your Aurora bill on IO, this might be a good service for you to check out.
SAP can't natively support Aurora, right? Like, I know it's compatible. I know it would probably work, but it would.
I mean, it would support the Postgres because you can connect SAP to Postgres, I think. So.
Would they actually support it? Like, I know it would work.
Mm-hmm. I mean, supportable versus workable.
Anyway, sorry, I digress.
I know that, I had a friend that set up Aurora right when it first launched years and years ago at this point, and they quickly moved off of it because the IO was costing them more than the CPU on their actual cluster. So it's nice to see that they're actually, trying to fix some of these issues and hopefully make it be a little bit more predictable too.
Yeah. I mean, anytime someone uses PIOPS, you always know you're in trouble. So, and that's kind of the default model of Aurora is, we give you this really fast storage, but you basically pay not quite PIOPS prices, but pretty close. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, especially, adopting sort of the serverless model of these things, like it's really, it starts getting into that value add, which is nice. And so I love that addressing the cost savings, which, we think in Amazon terms is just how they achieve scale. Like it is pretty nice to see. So I have a couple of workloads. I'm going to try this out.
It makes sense, I guess. The predictability of the workload means that that Amazon themselves can better kind of put customers in buckets for IOPS. And so they can manage capacity better. Whereas customers with very bursty workloads, they always have to make sure that capacity is available when they need it. Whereas, so they probably have like some headroom spare, which goes unused. So I guess the cost reduction probably is a reflection of how Amazon can optimize sort of arranging customers on the back end more than anything. Honestly, I know what I'm talking about.
I mean, it makes sense on paper.
Mm-hmm.
You say it with such confidence. How can we refute you?
Yeah,
I like Aurora.
I do too. It's if I wasn't too cheap to use Aurora, I'd use it for the website. But I just run MySQL on a container with the other containers that run the rest of the site. So because I'm cheap. Mm-hmm. All right. Private access to the AWS Management Console is now generally available. This will allow you to access the AWS Management Console from your on-premises network using a secure private connection to AWS. It is apparently easy to set up and use and can help you improve security and compliance. The benefits of this are, of course, improved security and compliance. I just mentioned reduced costs, is you don't have to go across your NAT gateway if your internal systems are making connections, improved performance, and increased flexibility. If you're looking for a more secure, compliant, cost-effective way to access AWS resources, then private access to AWS Management Console is a great solution for you. Allegedly. Or it's a good way to lock yourself out of your console.
Yeah. I mean, it has to be better than the previous way that you would enforce this control, which is by doing a conditional on IAM permissions based on the client's IP address. And so like, it's terrible because it's just like everything works fine except for you go to do something and then all of a sudden everything turns red. So I kind of like this from that perspective. A lot of companies have that control, right? We're not allowed to really access an admin panel, which the console is, from, an external network. And this is a way to sort of gate that access.
I mean, I prefer the SSO way, but that's my preference. So your Okta, then Okta validates, IP address you're on, and as well as, your user credentials, and then you can basically do it through that method. I never really cared for the IAM way either.
Yeah.
But, again, if you're not doing SSO, which I think would be the way I would do this is a good alternative option.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more curious about the reduced costs here. Does the AWS console really cost that much to?
I mean, if you're doing a lot of calls to it, maybe, but probably not.
No. There's no way.
Again, the console, not the APIs. So I don't know. Yeah. It just feels like a weird what they threw in there. Like, cool, reducing costs, but really?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're using a VPN, I guess, to support your IP restrictions, maybe that saves you some. I don't, or point to point. I guess I don't. Yeah, that's a stretch. I agree.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to think of the one customer that's like, this will save us X tens of thousands of dollars a month, and really want to know what they were doing.
Well, instead of doing event-based architecture, what they did is they just scraped the console page every 5 minutes.
There was a company years ago.
You always have a horror story for my ridiculous claims where you're like, oh yeah, no, I did that.
No, I think there was a client years ago that didn't allow anyone in. And essentially it was, you had to log into the console via this other page, and random things just wouldn't work because they hadn't set up the API calls against it. It's like random things just wouldn't work. I think it was called like Skyfence or something. Oh, okay. I gotta find it.
Well, I was looking for that. Let's move on to Cedar. So apparently Amazon is releasing support for Cedar to allow you to write and enforce custom authorization policies. Cedar provides a simple and intuitive API and SDK that makes it easy to write your policies. Cedar supports a variety of authorization models, including role-based access, attribute-based access, and capability-based access control. Cedar is apparently highly extensible, allowing you to customize to meet your specific needs, and it's well documented. It has an active community of users and contributors, and it has a pretty snazzy website. It's green. I like green. So there you go. I'd love to see more cool things around identity and auth for sure.
Right? Yeah, I mean, this is the first I'm hearing of this kind of concept, and I'm loving it. Right? Because this is one of those things where, if you're building your own app, I dread sort of the authentication flow, right? And so I'm always trying to leverage some other party for this, and so which puts me in some weird boxes sometimes. And so it's kind of cool running something that's I didn't write and have to rely on my own sort of design for security and access control. That's awesome.
Yeah. The examples they gave, this tiny to-do user policy thing, it's pretty great. It's a cute little app, and it gives you a very simple way to how to use it in a client, like a Python client or a Rust server. And it's not a bad little example of how to do it. So yeah, it's I love all this. Ever since CDK, everybody's rushing to make all these things as code, but not restricted by CloudFormation. So I'll take it as a win anytime it's not CloudFormation.
Yeah.
All right, Matt. Did you find what you're looking for?
I cannot. I'm still looking for it.
No way.
I might have to phone a friend of Peter to see if he remembers.
All right. Well, that's fine.
Low probability, though.
It's probably better off that no one actually knows the name of that tool. So I think it's okay. Yeah. Amazon SageMaker Inference now supports provision concurrency for serverless, which allows you to set a specific number of concurrent requests that your model can handle. This will help you to ensure that your model is always available to serve requests, even during periods of high demand. Provision concurrency is available for both batch and real-time inference models. And to use provision concurrency, you need to create a SageMaker endpoint with the provision concurrency mode. You can then specify the number of concurrent requests that you want your endpoint to handle. And the provision concurrency or Amazon SageMaker serverless inference is priced based on the number of concurrent requests that you provision. And you can choose provision concurrency for a single model or for multiple models. The cost per provision concurrency is per hour, and you're billed for the hours that concurrency is provisioned. And it'll cost you between a penny an hour and 10 cents an hour, depending on what it is and how you're setting it up. You can use savings plans for this. So if you want to save some money, you can do 1 year and 3 year savings plans opportunities. And the more you commit, the lower your price.
Seems to be becoming quite a pattern, doesn't it? Of move away from servers, have serverless. It's on demand. You pay for what you use, but also now you can have provision capacity because we realized that didn't actually work for people.
Well, it's not that it didn't work. It's that the people having to pay for this do not like spiky, unpredictable workloads, right? Like a lot of the provision capacity isn't because you run out of capacity. It's for consistency. And so like if you're going to use this, use it, right? And then we'll baseline the provision part so that we have a consistent cost model. Because otherwise we have no idea what our costs are doing. We don't know when it's out of control or we don't know when it's normal. And so a lot of this I think is less about actually having the capacity to execute than it is actually just standardizing and removing those big spikes.
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating in a way. It's like the old, like if you don't use your budget, you'll lose it kind of thing. Well, the flip side of that is, so if you pay for provision capacity that you don't use entirely, now you're just wasting money in the name of predictability.
It's a very difficult challenge, right? Yeah, because there's a sweet spot, right? You don't want to over allocate. You definitely don't want to make a 3-year commitment and pivot away from it. Right?
Yeah, I remember when Google did that for their storage, though, where they look at your previous costs for the last year or last period of time, and then they basically charge you the same amount, and then make an adjustment once a year to like renormalize how much you're paying for cloud storage. It was a way to iron out those bursty cost changes. It'd be kind of nice if they did that for all these things, really, so that you would eventually kind of tend to paying the price that you would have for on demand without having to pay for the provision capacity.
I feel like it would probably get abused. So like if a person had like an event where they do like nothing during the year and then they have like a big event at one point, they would have such a massive spike for a period of time. So like if there was like a monthly event or something, it might be like, or like a yearly event, like it might not actually capture it in a way that's meaningful.
I think this is where I want AI to solve this problem for me, because I don't want to think about this. Like having to provision, unprovision, committed capacity versus non-committed capacity, cold start versus no cold start. I really have to not think about this. So I hope AI comes and solves all these problems for me at some point in the future, because I don't want to deal with it anymore.
We're going to become so lazy as a species. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait.
The guy doesn't like to wear pants. Yes, I understand your joy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, for those of you who are really into Android phones and who were super excited about their new foldable Android phone, they may have missed the Google I/O cloud announcements. And so I'm here to help you out. There was 2 big areas of investment, of course. And since the entire theme of Google I/O was AI, of course, the first things up was new AI features. So first up, they announced Cloud Auto ML natural language, which makes it easy to build natural language processing models without any machine learning expertise, which is definitely the version I need. Cloud Auto ML Vision Edge, which enables developers to build and deploy custom vision models on edge devices. Cloud TPU V4 pods, which are powerful machine learning accelerators that can be used to train larger and more complex models. And Cloud ML Engine pipelines, which make it easier to manage and monitor machine learning pipelines. The Cloud AI platform, which is a unified platform for building, training, and deploying machine learning models. And these new products features are designed to make it easier for developers and businesses to deploy and build and deploy AI and machine learning solutions. And they also demonstrate Google's commitment to AI and machine learning, which are 2 of the most important technologies of our time, per the article. So there you go.
You wouldn't know it, would you?
You wouldn't know it. Secret.
It was definitely very AI focused, but I can kind of see why. They're just trying.
I think that's going to be the theme of pretty much every conference this year is going to be very AI focused.
I wish it was only this year. I think it's going to be the next 3.
Well, I mean, I think this year you're going to get all the really like lightweight use cases, like, hey, we're going to take our documentation and put AI around it so you can find help docs better. And then next year will be where you actually like kind of cool solutions with AI. But it'll be a few years of lots of things, I'm sure.
I mean, ChatGPT is great. OpenAI is great. In fact, I was really interested to see another model that they've built, which converts text to G-code, basically for building 3D models. So you can ask it to build your model of a thing, and it generates the code that you can just 3D print, which is awesome.
Wait, in language, you just say, "I want a cup that's this size." Oh,
exactly.
Wow.
I want a thing that looks like this, that does this. and it'll make something for you, which I thought was kind of cool. But I mean, OpenAI is great, and they're definitely hugely innovative, and they'll become very profitable. And what they don't have though is like the existing device base like Google does. And if Google get Bard right on Android phones with integrations into existing apps and people's lifestyles, that like accelerates them from the crappy Google Assistant that they have today to being something truly amazing. And if they get somehow hit first with that before Apple or anybody or Samsung or anybody else, it's going to be hugely profitable and life-changing for people.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The breadth of the Android user base is going to be like, that's such an advantage if they can capture that. Nuts. It's awesome.
I mean, I can use it more than just set timer or set an alarm clock.
Yes.
Well, now it can ask you if you meant to set an alarm clock. Hey, you didn't turn your alarm on this morning, but usually get up at 7 o'clock. Do you want me to set it for you?
At 7 o'clock, it's asking you that question. Like, thanks for waking me up, and I didn't want you to. Appreciate that. The next Google Cloud item is the launch of, we talked about Bard a few weeks ago, had additional programming language support, but now they've apparently introduced that into Duet AI for Google Cloud, an always-on AI collaborator that provides help to users of all skill levels where they need it. Duet AI is on a mission to deliver a new cloud experience that's personalized and intent-driven and can deeply understand your environment to assist you in building secure, scalable applications while providing expert guidance. There's 3 capabilities of this out right away. First is code assistance, which provides AI-driven code assistance for cloud users such as application developers and data engineers, and provides code recommendations they type in real time, generates full functions and code blocks, and identifies vulnerabilities and errors in the code while suggesting fixes for you. The chat assistant to get answers on specific developer or cloud-related questions. Users can engage with chat assistants to get real-time guidance on various topics, such as how to use certain cloud services or functions, or get detailed implementation plans for their cloud projects. Coming after your CCOE, Ryan. And then Duet AI for AppSheet will help you create intelligent business apps, connect their data, and build workflows into Google Workspaces via natural language.
I'd like to sign up for that. It's in limited access. I'd like to see if we can sign up for it through our GCP partners, whatever. But really, it's kind of like the machine that's going to build the next machine.
We're laying the foundation for that. I do believe that you still, since you have to ask the question, I think my CCOE business will be safe. That's half the challenge. That's really all I want anyway. Yeah.
I want a thing that does this. Oh, well, that's the composer service. You need the composer. Oh, okay. Now I know what to look for in the docs. Like, that is part of the battle. But if you can describe to it, like, hey, Google AI assistant, I need something that can take events and do things with them. Like, what do you suggest? And it goes, I'll suggest to you composer as a potential option. Maybe that's
I'm waiting for the next gen of this, where it's like the Miss 3K robots just sitting at the bottom of the screen as you're typing, making comments, criticizing you.
Clippy's going to be yelling at you.
Yeah, that's great.
You call that a piece of code?
Yeah.
So one of the things they announced at Google I/O that I don't have a story here for us, but they announced integration of Bard and stuff into Google Apps, and you could subscribe for the beta. And so I got the CloudPod Google Workspace into the beta.
Oh, nice.
So actually, most of the show notes today were written by AI. So
that's fantastic.
I just asked it to here's the article. Can you write me 5 or 6 bullet points on this article to summarize it? And it produced most of what I'm talking about today. So it's kind of awesome.
All right. So next week we'll just get our voices into some kind of voice generating service, and we'll just have the podcast run itself.
Weird.
Profit.
Yeah.
I still won't finish the transcription, but
yeah. It was like 3:30. We record at 5, and I was like, I'm behind, and this little button is in the thing, and you can push it, and then when you push it, it's you say hey, would you like to suggest content for you? And you're like, yes, I would. You just paste right into it. Here's the URL. Will you summarize it for me? And it did it. So it's pretty nice. I did tweak some of them because some of them it didn't do a good job on, but I'd say 90% was good.
Yeah, so. It's a huge enabler. Coding, I use it all the time because every time I have a regex question, I'm giving up on ever learning regex, right? I have to admit defeat at this point. It's not worth it. And so now it's great because I can just say, I want to find the 4th comma or whatever, and it's just okay, here's the thing. And I'm just this is awesome. That's
one of the things I learned about ChatGPT, having played with it, especially for writing code, is that if you ask it a simple question, it'll give you a very simple answer.
Mhm.
Don't ask it. Don't say write me a Python function that does this. Tell it who you are, what you're doing, what you're trying to do. Give it as much context as possible, and then ask the question, and then ask it to fill in the details. And it's pretty mind-blowing.
And it's funny because it's like, don't get too far into the implementation, right? When you're interfacing with it, if you get too far into the implementation, it takes that and it does weird things. But if you just ask it simple delivery of things, it actually does a better job because it doesn't infer all of your implementation details into the model. It is really fascinating. I like how it's making me change the way I ask questions to computers.
So surprise, surprise. Did you test out the SQL stuff I sent you yesterday?
I started to.
That came out of ChatGPT.
Nice.
And I tested it.
I didn't even think of that. You're genius.
And it gave the SQL query. It gave examples of the different tables and the output that you'd expect. I was
fantastic. It's great because not only was I already like mea culpaing because after spinning my wheels for a day and a half, like I love the fact that now I've learned that I can just ask the computer for that now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, so I was one of the podcasts I listened to was talking about the Apple Watch, and for those of you who ever use the Apple Watch, it's a pretty horrendous user experience. And they were talking about one of the big challenges is complications and like setting up complications on your watch, which are basically little widgets that you can set like weather and stock prices and different things. And they were saying it would be really cool if you could like use Chat GPT or something to like basically create your watch face. Like, like a watch face that has, my the temperature over on the bottom right, and I'd like it the middle to be my upcoming appointments, and like if you expand that out and start thinking about like reports or pivot tables in Excel, like things that I can do them. Do I like doing them? Hell no, I don't like doing them because they're a pain in the butt. But if I could like use ChatGPT to like write most of my pivot tables for me, like I might become a better Excel user. So like they're like these are the things that you're like this is starting to like open up to me now that I'm like when you start thinking beyond the basic ChatGPT stuff, like I'm going to create a script, which is the writer's strike issue. And you start thinking about like how can I actually use it in my day job? Like it gets kind of interesting really quickly because like if I could tell it I want you to create me a chart that has this data from my cloud bill and I want you to show where I have a break even on this or that, and it can do that. I wouldn't just send that data off without reviewing it. I think that's the key first step is you have to validate the data. But if it can get you 80 or 90% of the way there, that's really great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's where you're going to see it. It's going to be native in the tool. You're not going to go to ChatGPT and ask a question. It'll just be in Excel, right? Here's your pivot table that you want. Like you're not even going to ask it. It's just going to tell you.
I think it's the way that all good technology goes, though. To begin with, you kind of have to understand how it works to be able to use it. And then eventually it reaches some kind of point of maturity where you don't need to know how it works to be able to use it. And that's really what generative AI is going to solve for us. We need to know what we want from the inputs, but we don't need to know how the sausage is made.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to use ChatGPT to help us understand our cloud bills. And then at one point, we're going to need ChatGPT to help us understand the ChatGPT bills.
It's turtles all the way down.
Let's just hope it doesn't realize it's very expensive and turns itself off.
I wonder if someone's working on a Corey Quinn model for bills. Like the Duckbill Group has AI models that they would sell for your bill. That'd be kind of awesome.
Yeah, I was thinking more of like Corey lending his voice to AI.
Well, I mean, there should be a Corey Snark bot for 100%.
Yeah. ChatGPT tells you it's turned itself off because you're not using it enough and it's not going to pay for itself for this month.
Yep.
Good times.
All right, well, let's move on to Azure and services we hate with Elastic Cloud.
Almost made the show title. Not quite this time.
Of course, Elasticsearch is the new partner of the Azure native ISV service, which means it's basically fully integrated into Azure and can now infect all of your Azure experience with Elasticsearch. So that's great. There are several new capabilities they just launched this last week for this capability, including support for Azure Kubernetes Service, which makes sense because that's where all the money comes from, because Kubernetes is a loggy bitch. Integration with Azure Synapse Analytics, support for Azure Active Directory authentication, and improved performance and scalability. The third one, that AD integration, I feel like that's sort of like basic 101 of having an integrated service with the Azure native console. Just personally, I would think that, but apparently that was not part of the initial rollout. So there you go.
Now I want to know what was in the initial rollout versus this one and why that wasn't the first one.
Well, given Elastic's model, it was probably just locally configured users. Like they've made you pay a premium for that sort of ability for years, and they still do in their enterprise product, as far as I know.
Yeah, single sign-on. Yep, single sign-on tax.
Yeah.
SSO.tax.
Mm-hmm.
I was starting to think more highly of Azure and Microsoft, but choosing Elastico as a partner when they could have used OpenSearch.
It's not a partner. It's the Azure native. They're offering the Elastic service within their marketplace. So this is it.
They have an ISV program. People can pay money to be a part of the ISV program. Elasticsearch paid enough money. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Now, I mean, this is one of those things. Like if you're choosing technologies, like there are alternatives. But if you're in bed already with Elasticsearch, at least this gets it part of your cloud bill and your committed spend, and it makes it someone else's problem to host, and you can deal with it. You can focus on the fact that sharding your data is really hard, and not the other parts that are also really hard.
When people are addicted to drugs, it's like we don't just say, well, here's a drug dealer that's got a better deal. We say, maybe you should move off that and try to do something else.
I mean, Oracle?
SQL Server?
SQL Server? Any of these?
Couchbase.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
Fine.
Mongo?
No, not Mongo.
Yeah. Whoa.
No, we should have a CloudPod t-shirt with like all the different database technologies just scratched off.
Yeah. It's like an airplane with like the targets. Right?
Just Spanner and Aurora just consuming all of them. Like this is the only two you need. Just these two.
Have you been waiting months and months to hire your new AWS, GCP, or Azure architect, only to have them be poached at the 11th hour by a startup with a juice bar? Initiatives stalled because you're having trouble hiring? Well, I have a simple solution: Foghorn Consulting. Foghorn Consulting provides top-notch cloud engineers to the world's most innovative companies and can be burning down your DevOps and cloud backlogs as soon as next week. Foghorn certified AWS, GCP, and Azure professionals are armed with infrastructure as code, and from day one will be designing performant, optimized cloud-native or hybrid environments that deliver on the promise of cloud. Their FogOps solution even provides on-demand cloud engineering to augment your existing teams. Visit www.foghornconsulting.com or send an email to cloudtalentnow@foghornconsulting.com and tell them the CloudPod sent you. Your dedicated FogOps team is with you for the long haul, and they bring their own juice.
All right. Well, there's some new things in Azure Files. And for those of you who don't know what Azure Files is by that amazing name, it's a fully managed file storage service that provides SMB and NFS file shares, which is highly available, scalable, and durable. Although I did not see an ultra premium tier for Azure Files, so I'm sure it'll come later.
Coming soon.
Yeah, I'm sure. New features this week in releases for Azure Files is a support for Azure File Sync, which allows you to sync files between Azure Files and your on-premise file servers, something you might need for migration. Azure Files now supports Azure Files Premium, which offers higher performance and scalability, but no Ultra, but Premium is there. And Azure Files now supports Azure Files Edge, which allows you to deploy Azure Files to your edge locations. The cost of this will depend on several factors, including the type of storage account you choose, the amount of storage you need, the performance level you need, and the region. For example, a standard storage account with 1 terabyte of storage in the US East region will cost you $12.50 per month. That does not include your network data transfer costs, which probably are high.
It's fascinating they have an edge feature for this, because it's one of those things where it's like, what? And then you're like, well, I can see how maybe if you need to use a file system for edge storage for, like, I don't know, a cache file or something along those lines, and you don't have full control over the app. That's kind of interesting. I like that model.
It's a Windows server with an SMB share.
It's DFS.
It's been around for 25 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, things that, so is, Zed and Ock.
Do you want to manage a Windows server? Because I don't want to manage a Windows server.
I'm surprised they weren't the first people to offer this service.
Right.
Does any of the other cloud providers have a file at the edge service?
I don't know if file system at the edge.
You have storage gateway.
Yeah. That's
not
more of a caching appliance, isn't it?
Yeah, that's like on-prem or in AWS. It's not going to be like at a edge location.
What do you mean by edge location? You mean replicate it to a server in somebody else's data center? Just a different location.
Well, I mean, it depends because like you have the AWS on edge solutions where they're at a telco provider, and then you also have your own edge where you put a telco thing in your warehouse, and then you also have whatever that thing is where you deploy EC2 instances in your data center as an edge solution.
Outposts.
Yeah. So you have edge is a very fluid concept.
Or you just use the CDN.
The cloud full of sharp edges.
That would be a good show title. Why did you come up with that earlier?
Not about price.
We need a sticker.
$12. What's that? Do I buy 1,000
for a terabyte? Yeah,
pretty cheap.
Yeah, not bad.
Well, the Azure database for MySQL Flexible Server now supports major version upgrades. This means you can now upgrade your database from one major version to another without having to rebuild the entire database. Thank you, goodness. The upgrade process is fully automated and takes care of all the necessary steps, including data migration and schema changes. And to use the major version upgrader, you must have a subscription to Azure database for MySQL Flexible Server. You can also find more information about the upgrade in the Azure docs if you want to learn more about this atrocity and what it means.
Well, I don't want to know how it works. I want nothing to do with it. And I just make it, please, for the love of all that is holy, make it somewhat reasonable so that even if it's an upcharge, I'll use it because I do not want to manage these upgrades. Terrible.
If you can roll back, that's nice. If there's less downtime, that's nice. If it syncs ahead of time before it does it, that'd be kind of cool. But saying that it does all the necessary steps, I don't think so. There's a whole lot of testing involved in major upgrades for MySQL.
La, 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 all the upgrades. It said all the upgrades. I'm just going to click the button. La, 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 la.
What could possibly go wrong? Friday at 5 o'clock, and I'm turning on my cell phone. We're pressing the button, and we're going out of town.
To be fair, that's an AWS problem as well, because it's, I can count several occasions when people have just clicked a button. Well, it just said click here to upgrade, and then you click it.
Mm-hmm.
Never mind the CloudFormation or the Terraform that deployed it in the first place, which will try and roll it back and then fail.
Yeah, no, it is one of those things. Like you have it orchestrated for sure.
Wasn't there supposed to be a Terraform way to fix that so that if you have like an automated maintenance schedule to do point releases, that it would update back to Terraform? Or is that it's still, you'll have basically a drift that you had to go correct in your Terraform files?
Yeah, you can tell it to ignore.
Yeah, or ignore the attribute.
Ignore the attribute. That's right. Lovely.
Still not a great fix.
Yeah, I also love the one where you restored the database so using RDS from a backup, but then any changes in the future now think it's going to use the same backup, and I'm like, no, not really. Yeah, little things that you like. I like to use a lookup instead, which then you look at the lookup code for Terraform, and you're like, oh, I do not want to use a lookup. I don't have time for that.
Custom resource.
Yeah.
No, that's worse. That's just worse.
Be careful.
You're going the wrong direction.
It's 10 cents an hour.
If you do a lookup, actually, then when you do the restore or you do the Terraform plan, it'll say like, oh, your database is changed because the backup from last night is newer than the one you created the thing from. So yeah, there's really actually no good answer for that problem other than ignoring.
Undo. Yeah.
There's certain things like this, like a database that while I like Terraform and I use it for a lot of things, sometimes I'm like, maybe the database we're just going to leave on the side, or we'll launch its own Terraform workspace and just leave it over there. Just don't look too closely at it.
Yeah. There are things that you should not do. Like I recently updated my Terraform VPC module. That was a fun mistake.
Oh yeah.
That was using the open source one.
It should be an easy change.
Yeah, using because they apparently added in by default the 4 to 6 converter into the VPC subnet, so it'll convert V6 to V4 and vice versa. But if you're not prepared for that, it breaks everything. So that was I had to go figure that out. I was like, which of these 7 changes it made is the one that broke this horrendously? And it happened to be that one. But that was a fun 25 minutes of my day one day when I was helping my buddy out. I was like, ooh, I should not have done that. But things happen.
The open source VPC module is an awesome module. It really is. But they kind of need to understand breaking changes and backwards compatibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Don't use that without version locking. It will burn you.
Yeah. Well, this happened to be that I had my Mac made me angry one day, and I said, "Screw you! I'm reformatting you." And so I did that, but I forgot to back up potentially the configuration for that Terraform. So I had the stub. I had most of what I needed in GitHub, but I didn't have the lock file in GitHub because I somehow excluded that. And so when I installed all the dependencies of the Terraform init, it downloaded the latest version of the module, and then it was like, you had to update. I'm like, oh, what could go wrong?
Yeah.
This is
famous last words.
Famous last words.
Yeah. You were well on your way down that path by that point.
I feel like all the open source modules for AWS always have that problem. The Kubernetes one, we've run into that in the past of like, cool, let's just update from like 3 to 4. And you're like, how bad could this be? And then you're like, oh no, how do we get out of this?
I mean, there's nothing to it, right? Because there's so many changes going on across all the cloud providers that you have to update those things. They have to introduce changes. It's really difficult to introduce changes that don't just completely wedge your active resource as compared to state. So it's a challenge.
Well, the other big thing that's really important is to make sure you keep your Terraform up to date, because having to move like multiple versions of Terraform forward is also very painful. Yeah. So if you're also trying to troubleshoot a module at the same time, you're also trying to roll forward a Terraform to like Terraform, I don't know what version it is now, 3, I think. Mm-hmm. That's just a bad day. It's just a bad day in general, and I don't recommend it.
Yeah. It's one of those things like, this should be simple. It's not simple.
Yeah, but I don't want to talk about it because it's just embarrassing and resulted in 25 minutes of downtime while I figured out 4 to 6. So that's all you're going to get about that. That's it.
So we're not getting Justin did a thing segment?
Not on that. I do have one coming up next week, though. I tested several automated diagramming solutions for cloud. And so I tested 3 different versions, mostly from a friend of the show, Sarah, was saying, I need a way to document our environments. And I was like, well, I have a personal environment. I can go try these 3 tools before us having to go through a very lengthy security VR process and all kinds of things. Found out they're terrible. So I'll share that next week because that was a fun adventure as well. Yeah,
I've never found any of those that worked well. So I'm curious.
I did find one that was decent. Not perfect, but decent. And then 2 that were really horrible. So
I guess I'll have to join next week.
Yeah, or at least listen to the episode. So. All right. Well, let's move on to our Cloud Journey series. We are talking about, we're still in Cloud Native, and we haven't talked for this for a few weeks, but this is managed services this week. So managed services, of course, in Cloud Native are supposed to be things that help you reduce your costs, increase your agility, potentially improve reliability, unless you're in France, reduce complexity, and improve your overall security. And so, I thought we would talk a little bit about your guys' experience as managed services, but where do you think these apply, and where do you think they fall down for us?
Reduced cost is interesting because I think they can enable better architectures. Thinking about like serverless and event-driven architectures, which don't cost you anything, that could reduce costs versus running something 24/7. However, managed services in general are really not cheaper than running them yourself. It's just a matter of where you spend the money, I think.
I mean, you have to calculate the ROI differently.
Exactly.
Because like an RDS database, for example, yes, you're offloading SQL Server Management or MySQL Management or Postgres or whatever flavor of database you're using to the cloud provider. So maybe you have 10 DBAs and now maybe you only need 6 DBAs. So you have an ROI there because you were able to do it less DBAs or have the DBAs do a more valuable thing. You don't have to fire them necessarily. And maybe they're focusing more on like performance tuning and things that are app specific versus infrastructure specific. Because a lot of things they do are very heavy, undifferentiated heavy lifting, like backups and tran log rotations and setting up DR sites and clusters and all these massive pain in the butt things that you have to do to manage a database at scale and at high performance and availability. And that costs people and time and effort. And if you can focus on just your app, then you save money. But that ROI is not a direct ROI because that database costs, 20% more than that database would have cost you on EC2. But you have less headcount required to support it.
The other problem was, or not problem, but the other thing with costs is that a lot of times people be like, oh, I just, can go install MySQL on my EC2 instance or, and go from there. And then they're like, oh, well, if I move to RDS, I want multi-AZ. So they don't always compare apples to apples when they start to do some of the cost analysis, because they're like, okay, multi-AZ is a checkbox here versus now I actually need to run 2 servers and everything along those lines. So some of it's also you get a lot more out of it, and now it's a lot less you have to do. But because of that, you're like, oh, I want all these other features because, hey, it's easy to do. Why not? But there's cost to that.
I think the orchestration is the thing, because like you say, 1 server is easy. However you do it, 3 servers is hard. And it's worth spending the money on a managed service when it literally is just a click button to do those things. Oh, you want to deploy a new cluster? You want to replicate to a different region? Check the box, and it's done for you. Whereas most people, I would say, or most businesses probably aren't going to spend the time building that type of automation that they need, although they should.
I mean, if they can't take advantage of a managed service, I agree that having a control plane to manage applications at that layer. I mean, preaching the choir here because me and Jonathan have built one for Elasticsearch. But like it's important, right? Like it is one of those things. And yeah, I have never done that cost equation where you add up all the total cost of ownership and include like the ongoing maintenance and upgrades and all that stuff, where the managed service is more expensive. Just never has happened. And I keep trying, but yeah, I mean, managed services are so easy to leverage, and they just free you up to do so much more interesting things that it's worth it almost every time.
I did a rough cost analysis of it, and more just I wanted to leverage the auto update feature in Azure, so it automatically just swaps the boxes with the latest image. Think SSM on AWS that's able to like automatically run the Windows updates. And I was like, okay, this is taking us X number of time per X region times, number of servers. And it was like, we were running scripts and we had scripted it all out, but I still was like, someone still has to kick off the scripts and then sit there, and scripts don't always run right, or, hey, the server didn't come back up or whatever. And for what we were running, it was, 40 to 60 hours a month versus leveraging that. And that was a small use case here of just like a single feature. Now you start to do that across many features that you wanted. Okay, now you want backups and all these other things. It's going to take a lot more time.
Makes sense. What other, as you think about managed services, are there things that are advertised as managed services, Elasticsearch, that aren't really managed services or don't actually help you in this cloud native story? Because I think there's lots of cloud native things that are advertised that way, but aren't really cloud native.
Mm-hmm.
You mean like on Azure where you have to tell it the number of servers that run your load balancer?
Yes, that's a great example. I forgot about that. I forgot about that. I thought they fixed that a long time ago. They were.
It depends what technology you're using through the load balancer and how it will actually handle it or not. If in sometimes it can't handle it, if you're using certain technologies, then you have to do a static set, because it will drop all connections and stuff like that. Azure has quite a few things that I would expect to be more, dynamic and more managed servicey. Like, hey, there's these limits on storage accounts where you get so many metadata calls about the, file times and stuff like that you have to kind of understand. It's on AWS. It's kind of the equivalent of 3 IOPS per gigabyte. That it was, so there's still some of, but there's a lot. I feel like there's a lot more of it on AWS with like storage and load balancers, or either that, or I'm just really lucky I run into all these fun edge cases, which is highly plausible.
Well, I mean, even the IOPS thing, it's not, you're not managing that, right? That's the way they communicate the expectation of performance, right? They give you the option to do all the other things, so. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things. Like, and one of the things I like to consider is stuff that doesn't scale to zero, right? Like it's always a tricky sort of conversation to figure out if that's a truly managed service, if I have to sort of consistently sort of turn it off and turn it on, or it's costing me money. that sort of, those types of things. I mean, that's one of the better problems to have, I suppose. But
I mean, if somebody gives you a Terraform or CloudFormation to deploy a thing, does that make it a managed service just because you can turn it on and off and you can change variables and update things?
No. Sorry. No, it's not just the ability to turn it off and on for sure. But yeah,
I'm just thinking things like Composer, for example, Google.
Mhm.
Yes, you can deploy it using an API, but really all it's doing is dropping a bunch of other stuff into your projects.
Composer is a great example,
which you still have access to. So in a way, it's too exposed. So I'd say it's kind of a managed service, and it has its evolutionary path that it's following. But right now, if it's deploying things and exposing them to me, and I can tweak with them outside the management plane for the managed service, then I'm going to say that's not really as managed of a service as I would like.
Mhm. Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, that's my biggest gripe with Composer is that it's pretending to be a managed Airflow service, and it's not. It's a deployment template with a big like warning sign that says your mileage may vary, like kind of thing. And you're like, eh.
Anything else you want to say about managed services?
Reduces complexity is a hard one. Kind of.
It moves
it removes the complexity I know about and replaces it with its own unique complexity.
Well, especially in the Google world, we've learned, the networking at Google does not actually fit well with managed services in all cases. Yeah. So there are definitely things that can cause you some impacts.
With the complexity piece, it's also you have to understand you get to fit their model in order to really make it make sense. So like if you're going to use it for what it's designed for. Don't try to make it work for you and kind of use some edge case, because all you're going to do is burn yourself.
Yeah. Do not shoehorn your use case into any provided technology, right? Never ends well.
I think security is an interesting one, though, especially thinking back to the Log4j exploit and the immense value everyone who uses AWS got from the fact that they managed that effectively, quickly, and imagine having to do that to 2,000 servers yourself. And that was all done behind the scenes for you very quickly. And it wasn't a nightmare. And there weren't big stories about huge exploits or anything else. So having somebody else be responsible for that piece, for security of something which otherwise you'd be responsible for, kind of under the shared responsibility agreement, is awesome.
I was really surprised by that, because that is outside of the shared responsibility boundary, and from my take on it. But they did. They managed at the AMI level. It's kind of cool.
I mean, they also got a heads up because, I'm thinking Heartbleed and whatever the other one was. They knew about a lot of these things beforehand because of the scale of the infrastructure that all these hyperscalers run. So it's kind of also another benefit of a managed service is the odds are if there is a Log4j vulnerability, they're going to know about it and probably start patching it before even anybody else in the world knows about it.
Yeah, and they've certainly got the orchestration they need to do those massive rollouts at that kind of scale very quickly.
Yeah.
Agreed. Well, that was there's not a lot to say about managed services in my opinion. Like they're there, they work, they're a service. You should take advantage of them if you can, and your experience will vary depending on the limitations and the capability of what you need in your application. But they are great enablers and great speed boosts that can get you moving faster and take away complexity in some ways. But be warned of Ryan's comment. There are other complexities you get, as well as things aren't always up to date. Like if you look at EKS, for example, we've mercilessly mocked it many times for being many versions behind. That's been kind of resolved in the last few years, where they've at least last few releases where they've gotten much better at that. So sometimes they don't get updated. So do be careful of that as well. And those are things to think about as you think about these managed services. But I think core infrastructure ones like serverless and Fargate and some of those type of things I think are really great investments. Be careful on the databases because they're not really as managed as they seem. And experiment as you go into these journeys.
Yeah, and I guess sometimes they come with constraints which aren't present natively in the product, because that's just the way the cloud chose to manage things. And so even if you choose managed service for non-production or for development or testing or whatever you want to call it, proof of concept, it may be a great way to start, and maybe you'll decide in the future that you want to change it and manage it yourself. but that's okay. It was a tool while it lasted.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right, guys. Well, we'll see you next week here in the cloud.
See you later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
And that is the Week in Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Foghorn Consulting. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and tweet us your feedback at #TheCloudPod. Or join our Slack channel. Go to our website, thecloudpod.net, for sign-up instructions. All right. I have an after show today that's right up Ryan's wheelhouse.
Indeed.
So the information had an article about Marissa Mayer and if she could eclipse herself. And of course, this is related to the fact that she's now the CEO of Lumi Labs, where she's been, I think, since 2018 or 2019. She started this company. They've started creating applications and things. I think one of their first ones is a contact app to help you keep your contacts up to date on your phone. And she was the CEO, of course, of Yahoo from 2012 to 2017, which I think for people internally, they have a different opinion than people externally have about her tenure there. And then, of course, her real claim to fame was, being employee number 20 at Google. She built a lot of the core functionality and services that exist at Google today. And so I was curious, kind of your thoughts, Ryan, a little bit here on, what do you think of Marissa Mayer, and what do you think of her latest venture here into Lumi Labs?
I mean, to work it in reverse, like what I've been waiting for from Lumi Labs is sort of like, put up, give me something to play with, because their application availability and stuff is very early and not generally available. And even the stuff that they play with isn't, or that they talk about in the article and stuff, I don't know that you can actually get it just offhand. So there's still very much, like it would be a stealth startup by any other terms except for it's Marissa. So it's not, because it's in the news. I kind of want to see what they'll do. I think that, one of the things that she spearheaded while I was at Yahoo was a lot of the weather app stuff, and her views on mobile, for a company at the time that was really trying to figure out whether it was a content company or a technology company. Her views on mobile were, very different from what we were used to for the last few years since the previous CEOs, and had, she's very opinionated, very data driven, and had, introduced some really cool mobile experiences during that time. And so I think that, she's got a good track record of that kind of delivery. And so I look forward to what they're doing, but I want to see it.
Yahoo and cool mobile apps don't really correlate in my brain, but
for a long time, Yahoo Weather was the best app you could have on your phone. I swear. But it's one of those things where it's, now it's not, if you compare it to weather apps now, it's not the greatest thing in the world. But like a lot of that was, setting the tone, and I forget the like dark sky and that kind of stuff where they sort of came from that some sort of similar design strategy, and really just focusing on the usability. And it was also a time where the conversations are, should we develop an app or just do a browser extension kind of thing that your phone launches when you click the app button, right? Those were still very topic questions. And so
what kind of year are we talking for this stuff?
I'm guessing, I mean, my memory, I'm guessing it'd be 2015,
okay,
around there. So it wasn't like the early days where your apps are like literally, a bookmark on your home screen, but it was, not too much far past that. But, it's apps on your television was still brand new. And so a lot of work was done developing, a Yahoo app on the TV, which wasn't great, if I'm honest. I still hate most TV apps, so it hasn't changed. But, like really for me, being sort of an internal, infrastructure aimed person, like what I really appreciated was the way that data was communicated out and the way that data drove decisions. And the level of sort of transparency that she brought to the company was night and day, right? There was, having, a weekly all hands, okay, but then having the content that was going to be spoken about the all hands be community driven, where you could vote on what the topics and the questions were going to be for every week. So you had this direct access that at a company that was 14,000 people was unheard of. And so it was a cool time. Like it didn't succeed, obviously. Like it was, the only reason it lasted as long as it did was because of an investment that she didn't make, that was done, that she got to inherit. So, but yeah.
So you liked her, but she's also terrible. That's what I heard.
No, she just didn't succeed. Yeah, right. Like the only way she could have succeeded is by inventing the next iPod. Right. That was the challenge she had for success. And it wasn't going to come. Like
it was who was definitely a business in heavy decline at that point. Mm-hmm. Had tried to become a news site and really, steer into their portal story. Then they tried to become a media company, and then they kind of became a nothing. So. Well,
I mean, it tried to do so many things, but didn't fully commit. Right? They had the opportunity to go really deep into generating content the same way that Netflix did. They could have purchased Netflix, could have purchased Google. Like they were unwilling to really put it out there to succeed. And that hesitancy meant that everyone else got to eat their lunch. Google did it for advertising technology, and then Netflix did it for generating content. And then by the time Marissa was trying to do it for mobile app development, that kind of thing, I think it was the cards were already dealt.
I still use Yahoo for finance, actually.
I used to use as well. I would say that in my dating era, I used Yahoo Personals as well. So a lot of Yahoo things that I used back when I was younger. But now I rarely ever go there because there's no reason to, for me at least. But
I think finance is the only hanger. I mean, I have Yahoo Mail, but I admittedly hate that. So,
but even finance is really a shale. It's not as good as it used to be, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Like there's not as much, not as much community there. There's not as many conversations that happen. I used to love to go, read all these comments people were writing about a stock ticker and see what they had to say. And, some of it's just trolling social media stuff, but some of it's also kind of interesting. It's, some interesting insights or things I hadn't thought about. So, on really big stocks, you still get that, but on smaller stocks, you just don't really get that as much as you did back 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, you kill a community and it really loses a lot of value. Mm-hmm. Yes, we're getting to watching Twitter right now.
What's that again?
It's that dumpster fire.
That wasteland.
Yeah.
It's an interesting product they're building, though. I think it's Lumi that built the contact app based Sunshine.
Yeah, it's and I actually downloaded it because I remember when she created, the company and she was going to create this app, but I hadn't realized it got released for the iPhone. So I went and looked at it.
Oh, I didn't realize it was released either.
Yeah. So I downloaded it and started playing with it. But yeah, it's for contact management, it has a lot of really great data and it imports a lot of interesting things. And, I found I had 45 duplicates in my contacts already. And so I was able to clear those out. And so yeah, I'm going to play with it some more, but it's definitely not a company that's going to be $1 billion, Google type company. But, this is the first product they really invested in. Maybe they have a bunch of these little base hits and those turn into successful companies over time. But, it's only 25 people today at the company. So it's very small.
She's counting her money. Like
it's a bit of a hobby company.
Not doing it for the cash right now.
Yeah. When Yahoo, she got a great golden parachute on her exit out of that. So
yeah, I mean, she got a good salary.
Was hurting before that.
Yeah, she was doing just fine from Google and the IPO of Google. She was, then she got lots of stock at Yahoo and did quite well on that. And then, I'm sure she got a lovely golden parachute. So it's probably one of these situations she never has to work again.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure that's the case.
I mean, a good app that only costs $2 or $3 though, with a potential user base of 1 billion people. That's still worth something.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's worth building, and it's an area that people are really sensitive about. If you screw up my contacts, I'm going to be really mad. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely a sensitive area.
Yeah. second only to losing the baby pictures in Google Photos.
Yes. True.
Was there a story there, Jonathan?
Yes and no. Google announced that they were going to start deleting inactive accounts, which accounts that haven't been used in a couple of years, and they're doing it to stop people opening spam accounts and just using them and then throwing them away. But of course, there's a lot of people who've opened accounts for their kids years ago in their kids' names and never logged in, or like they encouraged people to open accounts and then like email them pictures and things over the years so that when they became old enough, they could log in and see this amazing history of stuff. All going to get trashed. And there's like different rules. So if you pay for OneDrive, Google One, whatever it's called, they're all the same.
Google Drive.
Then that counts as checking in. If you have the account on an Android phone, that counts as checking in. But there's things excluded from that, which is Google Photos. So if you've got Google Photos in an account and you don't visit the website or use the app to do something with a picture, they will delete your stuff. So, be careful.
Be very careful.
I was expecting your wife yelling at you over like losing all the baby pictures because something.
No, she doesn't know yet.
And she doesn't listen to the podcast.
But I doubt that very much. She listens to me all the time.
My wife doesn't listen to the podcast anymore. There, she's like, I like hearing you do it, and I'm glad you're doing the podcast, but I don't understand any of it. So she stopped listening a long time ago.
Yeah, she has to listen to me most of the time, choosing to listen to me when she doesn't have to.
Yeah, exactly.
Completely different.
It's just too much.
Completely different. No, I guess it's different with a first kid. With the first kid, you keep loads of things. We've got boxes of stuff. Oh, look, this is their first whatever. And then with the second kid, it's like, as long as I've got a picture they drew last week, I don't care. That's good enough.
Yeah. It is sort of funny how that works out with your kids. Like, the first one, you have all these things and, you did all these things for them. And the second comes along and you're just like, yeah, we're not going to do that.
Now that there's face recognition, you have metrics to prove it.
Yep.
Yes. I have numbers of photos per kid. And it's just like, ooh.
Per year that they were alive? Yeah, you're going to get in trouble at one point. Just picturing like a mad teenager yelling at you like, I looked it up and you only have 15 pictures of me. You have 500 pictures of them from ages 6 months to 1 year. What the hell?